When I was in class 3, I was just a little kid, playful, loud, and full of silly dreams. But there was one boy in my class who was different. His name I still remember sounded ordinary, but everything about him was not. He didn't laugh like us. He didn't talk like us. He didn't even act like a child. While the rest of us were busy drawing houses and trees, he would draw strange symbols, faces with hollow eyes, and old buildings that none of us had ever seen. His handwriting looked too perfect, not like a kid's. It was neat, precise, almost ancient. He always sat in the same seat, the last bench, near the window. The sunlight never seemed to touch his side of the classroom properly. It was like a faint shadow followed him around wherever he went. At first, I didn't care much. I was too young to understand what different really meant. But one thing I noticed, he was very smart. He could answer questions even our teachers hesitated to explain. Once, when our math teacher gave a tough problem, he solved it before she even finished writing it on the board. The teacher smiled nervously and said, "Good job, but where did you learn this method?" The boy just smiled. A small, cold smile. As days went by, I started talking to him, and somehow, he became my friend. He didn't have any other friends in the class. Most kids avoided him. Some even whispered that they saw him sitting in class before school started, even when the doors were still locked. I laughed it off, but deep down, I was curious. He was polite, soft-spoken, but there was something about his voice, a heaviness, like someone much older was speaking through a child's mouth. Sometimes, when he talked, it didn't feel like I was talking to a kid my age. It felt like I was speaking to someone who had lived many years before me. I remember one afternoon, it was raining heavily. Everyone was running to the gate, laughing, shouting. I forgot my umbrella. That boy came up beside me, holding his bag close, his eyes staring straight at the dark sky. He said quietly, "Don't go home yet. Rain washes away more than just dirt today." I didn't understand what he meant, but the way he said it calm, almost serious, made me stop. A few seconds later, lightning struck a tree right near the school gate. The branch fell exactly where I would have been standing if I had run. He looked at me, expressionless, and said, "See, I told you." I froze. He just walked away slowly, silently, while everyone else screamed. After that day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. He always came to school early, before everyone else, and when the final bell rang, he disappeared faster than anyone. None of us ever saw which direction he went. He never joined us for lunch. He never played during breaks. But whenever I looked back at the window, he was always there, watching, as if waiting for something. One day, I gathered enough courage and asked, "Where do you live?" He looked at me for a long time, then smiled faintly and whispered, "You wouldn't understand, but maybe one day, you'll see." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing his pale face near the classroom window. That small smile, and those eyes that looked like they had seen hundreds of years pass by. And from that day on, I started to feel it too. A strange coldness in the classroom whenever he entered, as if the air itself stopped moving. None of us knew then that he wasn't like us. Not at all. After that rainy day, something changed between us. He started talking to me more often, quietly, softly, like a whisper that never truly ended. We would sit together sometimes, and he'd show me strange sketches in his notebook. They weren't normal drawings, not animals or people, but twisted faces, tall figures with hollow eyes, and patterns that seemed to move if you looked long enough. He never used colors. Everything was black and gray. Sometimes, when I stared at his notebook too long, I'd feel dizzy, like the lines were crawling across the page, rearranging themselves. And every time I looked up, he was smiling. One afternoon, during lunch break, my friends were talking about visiting each other's homes for the weekend. Everyone was excited, everyone except him. He was sitting near the window again, his eyes half closed. So I asked him, "Hey, why don't you ever come to my house? We could play or draw something together." He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring outside, where the sky was pale and heavy with clouds. After a long silence, he said, "Your home isn't safe for me." That answer made no sense. I laughed awkwardly. What do you mean, my home? Safe from what? He turned his face toward me slowly, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw his eyes flicker like candlelight in the dark. They wouldn't let me in, he whispered. I didn't understand who they were, but before I could ask, he added, if you really want, you can come to mine. Something cold ran through my spine. No one had ever been to his house. Not a single classmate, not even our teachers, knew where he lived. Still, I was curious, too curious. Okay, I said, trying to sound brave. I'll come. For the first time since I met him, he smiled widely, too widely. Good, he said softly, but promise me something. He leaned closer, his breath colder than the air around us. Whatever you see there, don't tell anyone. The next day, after school, he told me to wait near the old banyan tree beside the gate. It was already getting dark, the sky heavy with the sound of crows returning home. A black car stopped in front of me. The windows were tinted so dark that I couldn't see inside. Then the door opened and a woman stepped out. At least, I thought it was a woman. She was tall, too tall, and unnaturally thin. Her skin was pale like candle wax, her hands cold. When she touched mine, she said nothing, only nodded once toward me. My friend whispered, "That's my mother, come." Her eyes didn't blink, not once. I stepped into the car. The door shut with a heavy sound, like metal sealing itself. As soon as we started moving, the world outside began to blur. The streets, the houses, the people, everything faded away into gray fog. I looked at my friend. He was sitting beside me, eyes fixed forward, expression blank. "Where are we going?" I asked. He didn't reply. Then his mother turned her head toward me. Her voice was flat, almost mechanical. "You must never tell anyone what you see tonight." And suddenly, I felt my eyelids grow heavy. It wasn't normal sleepiness, it felt like someone was pulling me into the dark. The car was filled with a faint humming sound, a low vibration that made my bones ache. My vision started to fade, the sound of the engine dissolving into silence. The last thing I remember before everything went black was my friend's face smiling faintly as he whispered, "Don't be afraid. You're almost there." When I opened my eyes again, the car had stopped. But it wasn't the city anymore. It wasn't anywhere I knew. The air was too quiet. The sky wasn't blue, it was grayish white, like an endless fog. There were no sounds of birds, no wind, no people. Just stillness. And in front of us stood a house. Huge, ancient, covered in vines and strange black flowers that moved without wind. My friend opened the door, stepped out, and looked back at me. His eyes were darker than ever. "Welcome to my home." When I stepped out of the car, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just quiet, complete silence. No wind, no birds, no rustling of leaves. Only a low humming sound that seemed to come from beneath the ground itself. Like the earth was breathing. The sky above wasn't like anything I had ever seen. It wasn't blue, or dark, or cloudy, it was empty. Like a pale sheet stretched over nothing. And even though there was no sun, everything was dimly lit, as if the air itself glowed weakly. The house in front of me looked old, too old. The wood was dark, almost black, and the windows were narrow and tall, like eyes watching from the walls. The black flowers near the entrance moved gently. Even though the air was still, I felt a chill crawl down my spine. My friend looked at me and said softly, "Remember, don't speak to anyone but me." I nodded, even though my throat felt dry. We entered through a massive door that creaked open on its own. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. It was thicker, heavier, and smelled like burnt wood and wet soil. Inside, the house was enormous. The ceiling was too high to see clearly, and faint shapes moved along it like shadows. The walls were covered with paintings, not normal ones, but faces. Hundreds of faces. All of them with wide, hollow eyes, staring directly at me. I wanted to ask him who they were, but I remembered his warning, so I stayed quiet. We walked through a long hallway. The floor was cold, colder than ice, and the further we walked, the darker it got. The only light came from strange blue flames burning inside glass jars that floated beside us, moving as we moved. Then I heard it, a whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I realized The faces in the paintings were murmuring. Their mouths were moving ever so slightly, their eyes following me as I walked past them. I couldn't take it anymore. "Who are they?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He stopped walking. Slowly, he turned his head toward me and said, "They used to ask too many questions." Then he smiled, that same cold, small smile that had haunted me for weeks. We reached a door at the end of the hall. It wasn't made of wood or metal, it looked like it was made of glass. But inside it, something was moving, like smoke trapped inside a bottle. He placed his hand on the door, and it opened with a sound that wasn't quite a creak, it was a sigh, like something alive had just exhaled. The room beyond was beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful, a massive garden glowing with light. Flowers of colors I couldn't name bloomed everywhere. Trees twisted upward, their branches swaying gently as though greeting us. But there was something wrong. When I looked closely, I saw that the flowers weren't growing from soil, they were growing from bones. Tiny, pale bones scattered across the ground, and the vines wrapped around them like veins. I stepped back, terrified. But he caught my hand. His fingers were cold, too cold to belong to a living person. "Don't be afraid," he said calmly. "They won't hurt you." I looked around again, and then I saw them. People, dozens of tall, pale figures walking slowly between the trees. Their feet didn't touch the ground, they floated a few inches above it. Their eyes were empty, glowing faintly with white light, and their lips moved silently, as if whispering to themselves. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. My whole body felt frozen, as though invisible hands were holding me still. "Who are they?" I managed to whisper. He looked at them with something like sadness in his eyes. "They're my people," he said softly. "They've been waiting for me to return." Then he turned to me and smiled again. "And now, they've seen you too." Suddenly, every head in the garden turned toward me. All at once, their empty eyes glowed brighter. The air became heavier, pressing against my chest until I could barely breathe. I stumbled backward, but his grip tightened. "Don't move," he whispered. "If you run, they'll follow." Tears filled my eyes. I didn't understand any of this, I just wanted to go home. He leaned closer to me and said, "I brought you here because I trust you, because you're my only friend." His voice trembled for the first time. "But you must never tell anyone about this place. Not your mother, not your friends, no one. If you do, it'll destroy me." Before I could reply, the ground beneath us began to shake. Softly at first, then stronger. The floating people began to hum, the same low sound that had filled the car. Their eyes flashed white, brighter and brighter, until everything turned blinding. I felt the world spin around me. The flowers, the faces, the sky, everything blurred together into a whirl of color and sound. I heard him shout my name. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the car. My head rested against the seat, my friend sitting quietly beside me. His mother was driving, her face emotionless. Outside, the world looked different. Darker, like twilight had frozen in place. I wanted to ask what had happened, but before I could, he said softly, "Don't. Not here. Just close your eyes." And like before, felt it again, that strange heaviness pulling me down. As my eyes closed, I heard him whisper one last time, "Remember what you saw, but never speak of it." Then, silence. When I opened my eyes again, the car was moving through darkness. No streetlights, no houses, just a long, endless road stretching into black nothingness. The headlights didn't seem to light anything, they just cut through a fog that shimmered like smoke. I turned to look at my friend. He was staring out the window, his face completely still. His reflection in the glass looked wrong, slightly delayed, like it was moving just a second slower than he was. "Where are we?" I whispered. He didn't look at me. "Almost home," he said. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. "But we already were at your home." This time, he turned his head slowly and smiled. "That wasn't home," he said softly. "That was the doorway." The car stopped. His mother, or whatever she was, stepped out first. I noticed her legs didn't bend when she walked. Her feet barely touched the ground, and her shadow didn't move with her. She opened my door, her voice calm but hollow. "Come, he wants to show you something." I didn't know who he was, but I followed, trembling. We walked into a narrow alley that led nowhere, only a blank wall at the end. Except, the wall was breathing. It pulsed slowly, like a heart, and with every pulse, the air grew colder. My friend reached out his hand and pressed it against the wall. It rippled like water. He turned to me and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm just showing you what's real." Before I could move, he stepped into the wall and disappeared. His mother looked at me and whispered, "Go." I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to turn back, but something stronger pulled me forward. My hand touched the wall, and the world melted away. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing under a black sky. The air was thick, humming with strange energy. The ground beneath my feet wasn't soil, it was something soft, like ash, and faintly warm. In front of me stood a massive structure, not quite a house, not quite a temple built from dark stone that shimmered like wet glass. Tall pillars twisted upward into the sky, disappearing into clouds that moved backward. My friend was standing a few steps away, waiting for me. When I walked closer, I noticed his face looked older, his eyes deeper, darker. "You're finally seeing it," he said quietly. "My world." I looked around. In the distance, figures floated between the pillars, tall, thin, faceless shapes wrapped in gray cloth. They moved slowly, humming the same deep sound I'd heard since the car ride. Some of them turned toward us. I swear, I saw no eyes, yet I felt them looking straight at me. I took a step back. I want to go home. He sighed. "You're safe here. I brought you because I trust you. You're the only one who ever talked to me like I was real." He turned to face the horizon. The ground pulsed under our feet. "You think I'm like you, but I'm not." He looked down at his hands, and I watched in horror as the skin on his fingers began to fade. Beneath it, there was nothing, no bone, no flesh, just light, glowing dimly like a dying candle. "I was never born like you," he said softly. "I was created 98 years ago." The world around us seemed to tremble as he spoke. The air grew heavy, and the floating figures began to drift closer. "I'm a jinn," he said, "a shadow between two worlds. My kind doesn't age. We just exist." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw sorrow in his eyes. "But I wanted to be like you, to feel human, to laugh, to play. That's why I came to your school. I couldn't move. My legs felt like stone." He continued, "You saw what others couldn't. That's why you were chosen. You're the only one who can cross between here and there without fading." His voice grew softer. "But you must not speak about this. If you tell anyone, this place will die, and so will I." The ground shook violently. The faceless figures were circling us now, their whispers rising into a low, droning chant. His mother appeared again, floating a few feet above the ground, her eyes completely white. "It's time," she said. The boy turned to me, panic flashing across his face. "No, not yet, he's not ready." She ignored him, her arms stretched unnaturally long, reaching for me. I screamed, but no sound came out. The air itself seemed to swallow my voice. Suddenly, he ran toward me, grabbing my shoulders. His touch burned like ice. "Close your eyes," he whispered. "Don't look at them." I obeyed. The chanting grew louder. The air cracked like thunder. I felt something wrap around me, cold and heavy like smoke turned solid. Then, a violent pull like being dragged underwater. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the car. My friend sat quietly beside me. His mother was gone. The road outside looked normal again, but the car wasn't moving. He turned to me slowly and said, "We're home." I looked out the window. We were parked in front of my house. "You'll wake up soon," he said softly, "and you'll think this was all a dream." But it wasn't. He smiled sadly. "Remember your promise." Then everything faded. When I woke up, I was in my own bed. My clothes smelled like smoke. My shoes were covered in black dust. And from my window, far across the street, I could see him standing under a flickering streetlight, staring up at me with eyes that glowed faintly white. Before I could blink, he was gone. When I woke up that morning, I couldn't tell if I had truly slept, or if I had just stopped existing for a while. My bedsheet was damp with sweat. My heart was pounding like I had run miles, and my head hurt as if something heavy had been pressing on it all night. Outside, the world looked normal. Too normal. The kind of normal that feels wrong after you've seen something you shouldn't have. The birds were chirping. Children were playing in the distance. But everything sounded muffled, like I was hearing it through water. I sat up and looked around my room. My school uniform was still lying on the chair, but the sleeves were covered with ash, faint black dust that smeared my fingers when I touched it. That was the moment I realized it wasn't a dream. I didn't go to school that day. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. The glowing garden, the floating people, his face turning pale under that dead sky. I kept hearing his voice in my ears. Don't tell anyone. But I was only a child, and fear makes children talk. That evening, I went to my mother. She was in the kitchen, cooking. The smell of food filled the room, but it didn't comfort me. Everything smelled off, metallic, like blood and burnt flowers. "Ma," I said softly. She turned and smiled. "Yes. What is it?" I hesitated, but then the words came spilling out. Everything. The strange boy, the car, the other world, the floating people, the way I woke up in my bed. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared at me. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and trembling. "Stop it," she whispered. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking," I said. "It really happened." But before I could say more, glass on the counter shattered, all on its own. The sound echoed through the kitchen, sharp and sudden. My mother screamed, stepping back. The pieces of glass were scattered across the floor, but in the reflection of one shard, I saw something behind me. A face. His face. Standing in the dark corner of the kitchen, smiling faintly. His eyes were glowing again. Soft white light, like mist trapped in a jar. I spun around, but he wasn't there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. Every creak of wood, every whisper of the wind, felt like footsteps. At around midnight, I heard something outside my window. A faint tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The sound came again. A little louder this time. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't look. But curiosity, that same cursed curiosity that started all of this, made me turn my head. And there he was, floating outside my window. We lived on the 4th floor, but he was just there, hovering in the air, his clothes gently swaying though there was no wind. His face was pale, too pale, like all the color had been drained out of him. His eyes weren't glowing anymore. They were black, hollow, and full of pain. He looked straight at me and whispered, "You broke your promise." My blood turned cold. "I told you not to tell anyone," he said again, his voice trembling with anger. "Now they know." Behind him, the air began to shimmer. Shapes dark, tall, faceless started to form in the fog. The same beings from that other place. He raised his hand toward me. His fingers were thin, almost transparent. "They'll come for me now. Because of you." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. He looked at me one last time, eyes full of sadness and fury, and said, "You should have stayed quiet." Then, slowly, he began to rise higher into the air. I pressed my hands against the window pane, begging him to stop. "I'm sorry," I shouted. "I didn't mean to." But before I could finish, his face twisted in pain. His mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. His body started to fade bit by bit, dissolving into white mist. And then he was gone. Just like that. The night went still again. I sat frozen on my bed, staring at the empty space where he had been. The next morning, I went to school. His seat, the last bench near the window, was empty. No one spoke about him. No one even remembered him. When I asked my teacher where he was, she looked confused. "Who are you talking about?" I pointed at his desk. "The boy who used to sit there. You know, She interrupted me, frowning. "There's never been a student there. That seat's been empty since the beginning of the year." My stomach dropped. I turned around. The desk was spotless. No books, no marks, not even a scratch on the wood. Like no one had ever sat there at all. That night, I went home in silence. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't eat. But when I went to bed, something was different. The room smelled faintly of burnt soil, that same smell from the other world. And on my pillow lay a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a drawing, my friend's drawing, a picture of me, standing in front of a black sky, and behind me, in a neat, perfect handwriting, were 3 words: "I'll come back." That night, I felt it before it happened, a strange heaviness in the air, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels alive. Even the crickets outside had gone quiet. The clock in my room had stopped ticking at exactly 12:03 a.m. It wasn't broken, I could see the second hand twitching, trying to move forward, but something was holding it still. I sat up in bed. The room was cold, freezing, even though all the windows were closed. My breath came out in small clouds. And then I smelled it again, that burnt soil scent, mixed with something new, something metallic. Blood. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger. That same sick, wet smell that comes before a thunderstorm. Only there was no rain, no wind, just the thick and moving air of midnight. I turned toward the window. The curtains were swaying gently, even though everything else in the room was still. A faint white glow began to seep in through the edges of the cloth. I couldn't move. It wasn't fear this time, it was something deeper, a force holding my body in place. Slowly, the curtains parted on their own, and he was there, the boy, floating again, but this time, his skin was as pale as bone, his eyes hollow and bleeding a faint white mist. His clothes were torn, drifting in an invisible wind. He didn't smile, he didn't speak, he just stared at me with a sadness so deep it made my stomach twist. "You shouldn't have told," he whispered finally. "Now, can't go back." His voice sounded different, deeper, broken. 2 people were speaking at once. I wanted to apologize again, but my throat wouldn't work. My lips moved, but no words came out. He floated closer, entering my room. His bare feet hovered inches above the floor. As he moved, every object around him began to shiver. Books rattled, pictures trembled. The light bulb flickered violently. "Do you know what they did to me?" he asked softly. He looked down at his chest. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. Right in the middle of his shirt, a blackened hole, burnt edges, smoke still curling from it. It wasn't a wound, it was empty space. Like something had ripped through him and taken part of him away. "They found me," he said, "because you spoke." I started crying. "I'm sorry, please. I didn't mean to. I thought." "You thought it was just a story," he interrupted. "But stories live. Once you tell them, they grow, they listen." He stepped closer, and for the first time, I noticed his eyes. Not just hollow, but filled with shifting shapes. Faces, hands, screaming mouths. "They're inside me now," he whispered. "They want more." Suddenly, the lights went out. Everything plunged into darkness. Only the faint white glow from his body remained. He stretched his hand toward me. "Come with me," he said softly. "They'll take me again, unless someone replaces me." His cold, translucent fingers brushed against my wrist. Instantly, my skin began to burn, a sharp, icy pain, like frostbite. My vision blurred. The room began to melt away. The bed, the walls, everything replaced by that same black garden I had seen before. The air was thick, shimmering, alive with whispers. Shapes began to emerge from the mist. Tall, thin figures with faces hidden in the fog. They swayed slowly, watching me. He told. One of them hissed. He broke the silence, another whispered. Their voices weren't human, more like the wind speaking through bones. The boy turned to them, pleading, "Please, take me instead. He's just a child." But they didn't listen. Dozens of shadowed hands reached out from the fog, grabbing his arms, his legs, pulling him backward. He screamed a sound that tore through the air like metal scraping metal. I tried to grab him, but my fingers passed right through his body, through smoke. "Don't forget me," he screamed. "Don't let them erase me again." And then silence. The shadows vanished. The garden dissolved. Everything went white. I woke up on my bedroom floor. The window was open. The curtains were still. The clock had started ticking again. 3:15 a.m. For a moment, I thought it was over, until I saw it. My wrist, right where he had touched me. The skin was frosted white, veins glowing faintly under the surface. And then I noticed the paper, a single, folded note lying on the floor near the window. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside, written in the same perfect handwriting as before, were 5 words. "You belong here now." The next morning, my mother said I had slept all night. She said she never heard a thing. She said she checked my room at midnight and I wasn't there. But when I told her what happened, she looked terrified. She didn't say a word. She just whispered, almost to herself, "That boy died 20 years ago." That night, before sleeping, I glanced at the window again. For a moment, I saw him standing there faint, almost invisible, smiling. Then, slowly, he turned away and faded into the darkness. And on the glass, in the fog of my breath, I saw a message formed by itself. "See you soon." The end. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.